This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you by Stella Artois Beer.
What's Working with Cam Marston is brought to you by Stella Artois Beer. Stella Artois is a perfect beer for celebration. Nothing caps off a big sale, hitting your incentive goals, or a profitable quarter like a round of Stella's. Brewed first in 1708 as a special Christmas brew, today Stella is a gift for everyone to enjoy year-round. Stella Artois. Find it wherever fine beer is sold.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. What's Working is the show designed to reveal the workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends that are shaping the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace around you. I want to bring ideas to the listeners that will help them get better at whatever it is that they do. My hope is that one of my guests, or in the conversation with my guests, someone will say something that will give you an idea about how to see things or do things differently. Today's show will be no exception to that. Shannon Waltchack is a partner in a firm in Birmingham called Shannon Waltchack, and he has been described to me, as he was presented to me as a potential show guest, as the Alabama real estate industry's futurist. What exactly does that mean? Well, we'll give Derek a chance to explain himself in a little while. The real estate business is always undergoing change. The value of properties rise and fall. The nature of contracts rise and fall. And my hope is that Derek will give us some insight into the real estate business in the state of Alabama from his expertise as a partner at Shannon Waltchack. Derek, incidentally, will also be the keynote speaker at the Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference to be held Friday, February 11th at The Club in Birmingham. His topic will be the future of real estate, as well as the technologies that are important today that may shape real estate in the future. And you can't talk about futures of technologies and things of that nature without identifying blockchain and Bitcoin and things of that nature, which I must frankly admit I don't know a whole lot about. Before we get Derek on the phone, though, it's time to bring in, or at least give you the thinking or the reminder of my friends at Sandifer Wealth Management. You've probably heard of something called an REIT, an R-E-I-T, a real estate investment trust. I have some of those in my portfolio myself, and if you ever have questions about what they are, and let's tie it to the topic of the show today, if you ever have questions about REITs and how they may apply to your own portfolio and what their good and bad points of these things are, and whether you should hold them for a while, and how they'll look in your 401k profile as you prepare for your retirement, the professionals at Sandifer Wealth will be happy to discuss that with you. Jamie Sandifer and Mark Salyers are the two that run the show there. I know them personally, can vouch for them personally as good, kind, generous, helpful people. Let them talk to you about your own future of wealth, your own retirement planning, any sort of planning you want to do for your employees to give them access to 401ks. These two gentlemen will be eager to help you out. Sandifer Wealth. Find them online. They're on Old Shell Road in Mobile. You can connect with them online, have them call you, give them a call, whatever it may be. When we come back, Shannon Waltchack will be my guest. You're listening to What's Working, presented by the Alabama Center for Real Estate at the University of Alabama. This is Cam Marston. The Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference and Expo will be held on Friday, February 11th at The Club in Birmingham. It's the state's premier commercial real estate conference. The connections made with peers across the state could very well lead to your next big transaction. To quote one attendee, if you aspire to be relevant in real estate in Alabama, you can't afford to not go. Go to ACREcom.info to learn more. That's ACREcom.info to learn more. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. On the line with me is Derek Waltchack. Derek is a partner in the firm Shannon Waltchack in Birmingham. He will be an upcoming keynote speaker at the ACREcom conference in Birmingham. Derek, welcome to What's Working. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, Cam.
I wish it was beautiful and fluent, and I wish it was poetry that introduced you to the show, but it's a little bit spotted with notes all over my desk here. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. My name's Derek Waltchack, and I live in Birmingham. I have a wife and 6 kids, and was a founding partner of a real estate company named Shannon Waltchack. And Shannon Waltchack our office is near Railroad Park in downtown Birmingham. We do 3 things as a company. We manage property for people, commercial properties. We have a brokerage shop that does third-party work. So if you wanted to grow the radio empire and move to Birmingham, we could help you find office space. And then the third thing we do, which we're probably best known for, is we buy real estate with investors. And then we have a fund business now where we go after a specific property type across the United States. And that's kind of where a lot of our time has been spent recently. So
you've said a lot of things that cue a lot of questions, but the one that stands out most is 6 kids, man. 6 kids?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Tell me about that.
So I grew up in Franklin, Tennessee, and I was an only child. And just really always wanted brothers and sisters. My parents, that wasn't possible, which was totally understandable. But just really always wanted a big family. And my wife, Rushton, when we met, I think she was on board with that. And actually 3 of our youngest kids are 3 kids that we've adopted from China.
Oh, my goodness.
And yeah. And so that's something I think she always wanted to do. She saw that when she was a little girl. And I was on board with it. It took me a while, but I got there, and that's probably the best decision as a couple we've ever made.
Wonderful. I can tell you're a good man. You've been described to me.
I don't know about that, but
you've been described to me as the people that put the 2 of us together as the Alabama real estate industry's futurist. Why do you think they said that, Derek?
Because I'm always messing with kind of weird esoteric things. That's just the way my brain works. But as you get older, you really kind of start to understand yourself and your life a lot better. And I'm 48. And I think in my brain as a child, I was just always sort of living in the future. Not like a Jetsons type of future, but just kind of what will things look like for me in the future? And that's just kind of where I lived, which that's not always good, but I did that. And so that's the way I'm wired. And so I always like to kind of look over the hill and see, okay, what's coming, and is there a way that I can sort of figure part of this out and be there before other people are there, and then hopefully make some money and show people kind of the future. And that's just if I had to sum it up, I just think that's the way my brain works, and that's what I really love.
Well, I hear not too conflicting. That's not the right way to say it, but 2 differences here. You got real estate, which is land, which is dirt, which is the oldest thing on the planet. And the future, which is yet undescribed and can't be touched, is non-tangible, and you're putting the 2 of them together. Can you give me an example of how you've put the oldest product in the world, that is the world, and the future, which is yet undefined, together? Is there something that comes to mind to say, Cam, here's the way to understand my title as Alabama real estate futurist?
That's a great question. Something this probably doesn't spot on answer your question, but sometimes looking in the past for what's the future is a good path to go down. And so this was in 2010, I believe. Well, I'm not sure what year it was, but it was in the mid, like maybe late 2000s. But a group of folks had worked really hard in Birmingham to create Railroad Park, which was really our first sort of public fun space in downtown Birmingham. Before then, you had parks, but they were sort of parks to events in history, or they were parks near a courthouse. And we didn't have any parks where people just went for the sole purpose of playing and having fun. Mm-hmm. And, a group of people, or somebody's working on it since 1984. So I can't claim I had nothing really to do with the park itself. But that happened. And around the park was a bunch of old blighted buildings. It was a scary area, quite frankly. And we kind of said, you know what, this whole area is really going to change with the Railroad Park. And so we were the first group to actually buy one of these old dilapidated buildings and move our office there. We moved from the suburbs. And that was sort of ahead of this big momentum that's happened in Birmingham, where there's just been this return to the urban core. So that's maybe that's a little bit of it. It's kind of looking at what's going to change and then being there and betting on that change. And it ended up being a great move. We were able to redevelop a bunch of other buildings in downtown Birmingham and just be part of this awesome movement for our city. So maybe that might answer your question.
So your bio online reads that I think this is what it's referring to. Now it's called the Stockyard at Railroad Park. Is that what you're referring to?
No, that's a second building. That's actually the second building we redid. It's just a block to the west of Railroad Square. But that was a fun building. We did something kind of a little crazy with that. We did basically, really, I think it may have been the country's first crowdsourced development. And what that meant was we had this old building that was not as like historic as Railroad Square was. It really was just a cinder block building with metal trusses. So nothing really particularly sexy about it. But what we said is, all right, Birmingham, we want you guys to name this building for us. So we had a naming contest where, the basically whoever cared to participate voted on the name, and the Stockyard won. And so the gentleman who suggested that won $1,000. And then as we made certain design choices, we also put those things up to a vote. So, it's just a way to get the community interested and at least let them feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was, it created a good outcome. I don't know if it's a great model that you can replicate necessarily, but we were happy we did it.
I'll read what it reads in your bio here from online. The Stockyard at Railroad Park includes commercial space using shipping containers, another first in Birmingham. A recent article in the New York Times lauded the progress in downtown Birmingham, featuring Derek as a key player. It's always nice to get a shout out from the New York Times. That's pretty impressive.
I know. I had to send that home as soon as it came, and I think my parents were excited to see that.
The story of crowdsourcing the name reminds me of this funny story out of Canada from years ago where the population of Canada was invited to name their newest Coast Guard boat. Do you remember this? Did this catch your eye?
No. Tell me.
So the population of Canada was asked to name this new beautiful, elegant, high-tech Coast Guard cutter or something like that. And somebody suggested Bodie McBoatface. And the entire population of Canada voted to call this new Coast Guard ship Bodie McBoatface. And they're like, oh, gosh, we never should have asked the people.
Yeah.
Because now we've got to honor their request. and don't you know all these sailors just loathed getting on this new commission called Bodie McBoatface? There's supposed to be these macho guys in the elements standing on this child's toy, essentially. So
yeah, and that's kind of what I was meaning when I said I don't know that we'll repeat it, because one of the things I was really hopeful for was to put out and say, hey, what would you guys like to see in this building? And that perhaps we'd get some ideas that we hadn't considered. We could go get old, spaghetti factory or somebody like that, a restaurant. And and then what you realize is that the people who aren't in the business, they don't really understand kind of the window of what's possible. And so you had all kinds of suggestions that just, it wasn't going to happen. You weren't going to get, whatever to come to Birmingham and come in this spot. So I don't know, maybe there's a better way to do it, but that was how we saw it.
Real quick, before we get into some of the expertise that you have, where are your roots? You obviously live in Birmingham now. Are you born and raised Birmingham, or did you just tell me Tennessee?
No, I grew up in Franklin, Tennessee.
Yeah, you did say that.
Yeah, and still love Tennessee. I'm despite the fact I've been in Alabama for however long, I'm still a diehard Vols fan. Yeah. And it's been a pretty ugly 15 years, but it'll get better.
Sacrifice. Sacrifice.
Absolutely.
So
yes,
did you choose Birmingham to develop your profession because of the opportunities you saw in the commercial real estate world there?
No, I wish I had been that. I wish I had kind of had that much foresight, but no, it was actually a pretty providential kind of turn in my life. I was an accounting major at Sanford, heading to Tennessee for law school in the fall of '96, and I had an internship at a company named Eistra Properties. And at that company, there was a gentleman by the name of Ken Sibley, and he was a broker. Was 38 years old. He had just been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, and had 3 kids. And so that spring, I was an intern for everyone. And then by the summer, they asked me to stay in town and be his assistant. And then by the fall, 2 weeks before law school, I had bought my books, rented my house in Knoxville. They said, hey, see if you can get a deferral for a year, because he was going downhill really quickly. And so I did. I got a deferral, worked with him for another 9 months or so. He passed away. And then I loved real estate and then stayed. And that's how I got in the business. And so I think God had a hand in my life, directed me to be able to help Ken. I learned a lot from him. I go to Ken's church now. That's where I married my wife. Just everything my whole life sort of just turned at that moment. I'm very thankful for it.
Providential, perhaps, is the word.
100%.
Yeah. We're on the line with Derek Waltchack. He is a partner in Shannon Waltchack in Birmingham. He's going to be the keynote speaker at the upcoming Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference and Expo to be held Friday, February 11th at The Club in Birmingham. And Derek, when we come back from break, I want to talk about something that's in your bio, which is the expertise you have on Bitcoin, blockchain, how it relates to the commercial real estate industry, and then perhaps the future of the web. We can get into some of your passions about the future. How does that sound?
I can't wait.
All right, we're going to a break. You're listening to What's Working, presented by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed at the University of Alabama. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm David Nelson, brewmaster and owner of Braided River Brewing in downtown Mobile. We make drinkable, flavorful craft beer perfect for life on the Gulf Coast. So pick up one of our 6-packs before your next adventure, or stop by our tap room for a relaxing afternoon with friends. Follow us on social media for the latest beer releases and events, and ask for a Braided River at your favorite bars and restaurants. Thanks for your support. We look forward to sharing our beers with you.
I'm Cam Marston. You're listening to What's Working. We're back. What's Working is presented by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, better known as ACRE, at the University of Alabama. Derek Waltchack is a partner in the real estate firm Shannon Waltchack in Birmingham. We will be an upcoming keynote speaker at the Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference to be held Friday, February 11th in Birmingham. He is going to talk to us now. Derek, let's get into this Bitcoin, blockchain, and this Web 3.0 stuff that I will be honest with you, I don't understand. We did a show not long ago with a guy here locally named Scott Tyndall, and he very carefully broke down Bitcoin and blockchain for me. It was about a 35-minute conversation, and in the end, I knew enough to fill a thimble, realizing there's an ocean of content out there. So I ask you to be patient with me as you go through this, and if I have to stop you to get some understanding, I beg your forgiveness in advance. So with that, Bitcoin, blockchain, Web 3. The floor is yours, my friend.
Okay. So I think understanding a starting point is probably important. In 2016, I spoke to a Sunrise Rotary group in downtown Birmingham, and I had spoke to them 2 years in a row on real estate and kind of what's happening downtown. And they asked me to come again, and I was just like, I don't want to deliver another real estate talk because it's just kind of the same stuff. And, I don't know how interesting that is really. And I just read an article in Wired magazine, which talked about certain technologies that were going to sort of disrupt the future. And it really grabbed me. I mean, it was like, wow, this is incredible. And I was like, I want to give this talk. So I pulled 4 pieces of technology from that article that I thought would affect Alabama's future, given the manufacturing base we have here and sort of what we're good at, which is banking and manufacturing. And so that morning I spoke about autonomous vehicles and fleets, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and blockchain. And I went through each one and kind of explained how, for instance, when you're running a fleet of autonomous vehicles, you need one vehicle for every 10 that you have today, because everyone utilizes their car 7% of the time. So there's a ton of wasted time in your car that you don't need. And so fleets could actually accomplish, basically 1 for 10. And how eventually, that will push the demand for cars down in the United States, and particularly even the kind of cars that are manufactured. Talked about 3D printing and how that's sort of additive manufacturing and sort of can change sort of the game for manufacturers who might have a moat around them today, but they might not in the future. And then talked about IoT, which is basically sensors on billions of things to kind of improve manufacturing and just various processes. And then the fourth one was blockchain, which quite frankly at the time was the least interesting of the four to me.
Yeah, and this is 2016. Let me make sure I got my mind right. 2016.
That's right.
Okay, keep going.
And okay, so I ended up being asked to give that speech 6 or 7 other times that year. And so each time I gave the speech, I referenced the price of Bitcoin just because, it was kind of like, blockchain's going to affect banking, certainly. And the price of Bitcoin today is X, So as I gave that speech, Bitcoin was at 200, then 400, then 800, then 1200, then 800, then maybe back to 400. I don't remember exactly. And it never occurred to me during those speeches to actually buy some Bitcoin. Yeah. I don't know why. Wish I had. But my final time, the 7th time I gave it, which was probably in like October, I actually bought some. And what I found, I bought some Bitcoin. And of course, when you buy something, you want to learn more about it. So my first advice to anyone who's interested in looking at and understanding Bitcoin is just go buy a little bit, because it will increase your desire to learn. And so I did that. And then, given the way my brain is, it was the most fascinating, deepest rabbit hole I fell down in my entire life. And I'm still doing it today. I've probably spent 5,000 hours between podcasts and reading and just taking in as much information, going to conferences as I possibly could, because I think, blockchain technology, and then Web3, which we can talk about, I think it's really the future. And again, it's it could be, people say, we'll see, but it could be the greatest, wealth transfer in our lifetimes.
You don't sound like a commercial real estate guy. You sound like this does not fit your profile of the commercial real estate guy. Where does your day job come into play?
Well, no, I mean, what I described is afternoons or evenings or mornings listening and reading. I mean, I maintain my day job, and I really love real estate. I love the idea of just picture a fruit tree. You plant it, it's a little whip, just a tiny tree. And then in 10 years, it's going to be producing fruit or nuts year after year after year. And your work has already been done in the past, and it continues to produce for you. And that's what real estate is to me. And so I just love that sort of loop. So I very much love real estate. I don't want to give you the impression that I don't. But I really, this technology and kind of what it can do is just massive. And it's just so interesting to me.
So are you able to apply your knowledge of blockchain and Bitcoin to real estate? Are there transactions that are being conducted using the blockchain?
Yes. So a couple of years ago, I did a really deep dive on that. And, you hear about people wanting to record titles on a blockchain. And all a blockchain is a database. And it's a database essentially that's been decentralized, which means, you can have a database on your computer that everyone in the world uses. Yeah. And that's a centralized database. And, there's probably millions of those applications being run all over the world. A decentralized database would mean that database is not only stored on your computer, but it's stored on hundreds or thousands of computers around the world. And those different computers sync up to decide what is the correct state of the database. Did Frank send to Sarah 1 Bitcoin? Right. And it's basically the majority of them agree, then it is locked, and then it's put into a block that is then chained to the past period's data. So that's a blockchain. It's a block of data chained to all the prior data from the beginning of when it started running. Right. And so the thought is eventually real estate, instead of being recorded at the county courthouse with paper, is going to be recorded on a blockchain. And the advantage of that is, anyone can check that instantly from their computer. They can know it. It can make title insurance perhaps go away. And so that's a pretty expensive part of a real estate transaction. I was going to
ask you what this means for title companies.
Yes. I'm sure they'll still have a role in it. But the problem is, and this is where we're not ready for it yet as a country, is, if you think about what really happens is, paper titles are still recorded in county courthouses. And that's the way it's done. And so if you have a blockchain, until you stop recording paper titles in a courthouse and you say it's only on a blockchain, then really there's no purpose of the blockchain yet. Because if you're just going to record it on paper title and that's actually going to be the ultimate authority, then there's no point in having this blockchain in between. I think
it's going to require a complete shutdown of the paper model for the blockchain model to take effect.
That's exactly right. If you want to get the true utility out of a blockchain that you can.
Yeah.
Which to me, that's why you would do it. Because once you have recorded, let's create a scenario. Let's say there's a shopping center in Homewood, Alabama, and the ownership of that blockchain the ownership of that shopping center is now recorded on the blockchain. Well, then it's essentially digitized, the ownership. And then potentially we could sell fractions of that shopping center to different people on the blockchain.
This is artwork stuff that they're talking about these days.
Yeah, the NFTs. That's correct. Non-fungible tokens.
I interrupted you, Derek. Please continue.
That's okay. No. I mean, that was pretty much it. So the answer is, blockchain is going to affect real estate initially in probably two ways. One, with recording of titles, and there's countries like Estonia does this now. You record on a blockchain, but I think it's going to take a long while for the U.S. For this stuff to change. And here's my guess, putting on a futurist hat, is a blockchain system would be cheaper to maintain than this paper system at a county courthouse. So maybe at some future date, we hit some massive economic crisis and tax receipts go to 50%, and county courthouses are looking, to how do we save money? And perhaps that's then the opportunity for this to kind of come in. But until there's a forcing mechanism, I just don't see it. I don't see it happening.
Is there any industry or product that you're aware of outside of the real estate world in which you exist that they have moved completely to the blockchain record keeping? Much like you're saying we need to do, or that we may do somewhere.
That's a great question. I don't know. I know that there's been a lot of inroads into provenance of food for having basically a chain of custody for food that comes. Let's just say it's lettuce that comes from California, or onions, which every once in a while there'll be an E. coli outbreak. And so if where those things come from can be stored on a blockchain, you can trace where quicker and better. Mm-hmm. So I know that is happening. I think really the biggest killer app for blockchains at the moment are financial products and basically DeFi, which is decentralized finance. Mm-hmm. That's probably what has the very most traction at the moment.
Where does Web3 come into this?
Okay, so Web3 is just incredible to me. How much time do we have in this segment?
We've got about 2 minutes.
We probably want to push that to the next one.
All right.
Because I won't be able to get it in 2 minutes.
Okay. So let me ask you another question that's occurred to me, and we'll pick up Web3 in the next segment. If you did a real estate transaction and your customer came to you and said, hey, I know you're used to getting paid with a check, but we're going to pay you in Bitcoin, what would you say to that?
I'd say bring it on. Absolutely.
Would you offer a discount to be paid in Bitcoin?
No, I wouldn't. What's incredible, and I don't think the world quite understands this yet, but there is extreme wealth now in the early, and I don't consider myself early being in 2016, but there's extreme wealth in folks who got in 2011, 2013. And I think the more you can tap into that wealth, the better, because we're talking a lot of money. And in some people's minds, even who own it, it's almost like it's not real. Like they think in terms of that picture will cost me 3 Ethereum. Well, 3 Ethereum today is like almost $10,000. Yeah. And so if you said $10,000, you're like, whoa, but it's just 3 ETH. Well, I've got, 1,000 ETH. That's no big deal. And so I think there's an untapped potential for people who are selling things, people who are raising money to accept crypto.
Yeah. I see it coming, and my friend Scott Tyndall, who was on the show in the fall, says it's not as far away as you think, Cam. It's going on out there. It's just not on the surface just yet. And go ahead.
There's instant ways. I mean, like if I said, yeah, we would take Bitcoin, but quite honestly, we would probably convert that immediately to US dollars because that's what our investors who were in the deal with us would want.
Yeah.
But there's easy ways to do that with very little, almost no fees involved.
Derek Waltchack is a partner at Shannon Waltchack in Birmingham. He's going to be a keynote speaker at the upcoming Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference on February 11th at the club in Birmingham. When we come back, we're going to talk about Web3. You're listening to What's Working, presented by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed at the University of Alabama. We'll be right back. Real estate is a relationship business. Whether you're young and inexperienced or an industry veteran, the connections you'll make at the Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference and Expo on Friday, February 11th in Birmingham will be with the most relevant players in the industry. It's the premier commercial real estate conference in the state. To see the list of speakers, to get info on continuing education credits, and how to become a sponsor and to register, go to acrecom.info. That's acrecom.info. Hey, this is Cam. Thanks for listening, and I hope you're really enjoying the podcast. Do me a favor and search for Cam Marston on your social media outlets and like us or follow us or whatever is the right thing to do. Also, if you know others who'd benefit from the podcast, please forward it on to them and encourage them to listen. If you're so inclined, we'd love your rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Those ratings matter. Finally, don't be a stranger. Email me with your comments, your feedback, your thoughts, your show ideas, whatever. Cam, C-A-M, at cammarston.com. I'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you very much for listening. Now, back to the show. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is presented by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed in the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. On the line, I have Derek Waltchack, partner with Shannon Waltchack, a real estate firm located in Birmingham. He's been described to me as the Futurist, Alabama's Futurist for real estate. And Derek, just prior to the break, you were about to introduce us to the subject of Web3. If you would, please tell us what the world's going to look like through the lens of Web3.
I'd love to. So to understand Web3, let's kind of get context for Web 1 and 2. When the web first rolled out, the first sort of websites were basically brochures. They were static. It was really just kind of read only. And that's the way that worked. Web 2, which is what we have today, is, it's an internet that you actually interact with. So it's not static. And what we have all seen are these behemoth companies that basically receive or pull data, and that data is very valuable. And in exchange for that, they give you free services, and then the cost of the free services less what the value of the data is, their profit basically. And so really, no one alive understands what their data is truly worth. I mean, I don't know myself. But we know that we give it and we get these services in return. And then these companies like Facebook, Google, et cetera, just get bigger and bigger. It's very convenient. But what happens in this environment is the people who are actually providing the data or creating the content, the musicians or the people who create videos, they get actually very little of what they create. And so I think on YouTube, I don't even know exactly what the percentages are, but it might be 30% of the rake you get. And probably less, musicians even less so. And so what Web3 with sort of blockchain in the background, basically the idea of Web3 is that content creators will be able to use tools that were not available before, where they can actually receive much more of the value that they're creating. And this is possible because of these new tools that have been created. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
In real estate, I use Google Maps all day long and Street View. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a shopping center fund And we've bought shopping centers all the way from Wisconsin down to the tip of Florida. And that's my job. I find the deals for us. And so when a project comes in and says, we can buy this, first thing I do is go to Google Street View or go Google Earth first, look at the aerial, understand how the roads work, just to see, is this a corner? Is this a good center? And then I'll go to Street View and kind of get a sense of what the area around it looks. And that'll be sort of my first screen. Well, Google Street View is great. And the way that they get their data is they have these little vehicles that they actually spend $500,000 on. They look like little Kias, but they're expensive. And they run around the United States with these, tall cameras and take pictures. Okay. Yeah. Very expensive process. And unless you're in a major city, your data is updated maybe once a year, which is fine. It doesn't have to be updated more than that, but although more frequent would be more better. And so there's a new company that's spun up. It's called Hive Mapper. And what they have done is they've said, okay, what if we outsourced the actual filming of the streets? Could our cost be much cheaper than Google's? And in fact, it can be. And so what Hive Mapper has done is they've created this $250 dash cam that you put in the front of your car, and you ride around.
So you're talking about me as just a guy. I'd put it in my car.
Exactly. This is going to be your future hustle.
Okay.
And so you ride around. It's recording all the time, what your car is seeing, and that is populating a map. And in exchange for this, you are awarded a token. And this token, I think it's called Honey. And this is a new project, and they haven't released their tokens yet. So it's still way early in it. But you receive a token, okay, for doing this. So X number of miles gives you X number of tokens. I think there are over 3 million apps that run on Google Street View's back end.
Wow.
And so those apps are paying Google for that. And there's also advertisements that come from that as well. Okay. And so once the Hive Mapper has created their map, that will be updated weekly, not annually. For advertisers and for apps to now use this better map, they have to buy the Honey token. And so what you have created is a business that's centered around this token. So this token is actually what is the valuable piece. And so this company, instead of trying to sell their products, make a profit with cash, they will drive value to this token. And so new tokens will be created each month. The company will get, and I don't know what these percentages are, but say that the company gets 30% of the tokens. And as advertisers buy these tokens in order to use this platform, they then reduce the supply of the token, and the value of the token goes up.
Yeah.
What you have done is you've created a crowdsourced way to achieve what Google Maps has done at probably 1/10 the cost.
Interesting. And it's getting everybody in on the gig.
Exactly. And there's another one that's even better example, but harder to explain, that I've been in very early and love and support. And it's a project called Helium. The token is HNT. And what Helium has done is they have created an IoT network using LoRa, which is a spectrum. It's a frequency. And they've created basically a ubiquitous IoT network across the United States and actually across the world now, where you can basically get these sensors that might sense location, temperature, vibration, whatever. And these sensors, because the LoRa frequency, the battery requirement is very low. So you can put a little LoRa tracker on something, and that potentially can go for like 5 years without changing the battery.
Wow. So
yeah, so it's incredible. And Helium is now getting into actually creating a 5G hotspots that will tap into existing networks, because there's a problem with 5G that it doesn't really penetrate buildings. And so you're going to need, if you're going to have a ubiquitous 5G rollout across the country, you're going to need a bunch of these cell towers actually inside of buildings. And they've created another way that's, again, 1/10 of the cost, to let people participate and actually earn and own part of the network, which is incredible.
It is incredible. And I can hear in your voice you're excited about this thing. At which point does it disrupt my day? I mean, you haven't used the word yet, but I hear it coming. Disruptors. These are going to be disruptors to traditional business. I don't think any of us can conceive of Google or Alphabet being disrupted, but it's going to happen someday. They all do.
Right.
So at what point is my world? I'm comfortable now in my 50th-ish year of feeling like I know what's going on out there. At what point am I going to be upended? Is this 5 years away? Is this 10 years away?
Well, helium, that project is here and now. Now, will it make a difference to you if you don't want to participate or be a part of it? Not at all. No, it just, hopefully, if this works, you'll have better connectivity with your cell phone. And, maybe one day you let someone borrow your tools and you might buy a tracker and you just throw it in that. And if you forget, they forget to return it, you know where that stuff is.
Yeah. Yeah. I see.
And Amazon is trying also with their sidewalk program. They're trying to do this as well, but they were kind of do it in sort of a sneaky fashion where if you buy their doorbell, basically it connects to your Wi-Fi and it's providing some connectivity as well without it being super clear to you. Helium's doing this and it's kind of like out in the open. If you choose to buy a hotspot and earn this token, and you're paid for it.
Yeah.
Basically. So the future I see is basically taking these massive silos and decentralizing them and letting people participate and actually earn some money for doing some of the function that was done in the silo, which is incredible.
This is the conversation I had, part of the conversation that I had with Scott Tyndall, and he's talking about decentralizing and breaking up the financial service systems. And what I detected in his comments was, but there are other giant systems being created. There's a lovely feeling that everybody has of we're taking down the giant, but in the process, a new giant is being created. The giant cries anarchy and power to the people. However, they are the new giant. It's just shifting from one place to the next. The giant's going from there to there. And the new giant's saying power to the people, but it's really just a new giant. Any feedback on that?
No, I think you are not incorrect. And then I guess it kind of comes back to, really, it's a question of do you want power centralized or decentralized?
But it always, that's the history of mankind is we cry for decentralization, but ultimately it gets centralized again. It's just it's an ebb and flow. It's a pendulum swing. I don't want to be a detractor here, but that's the way it seems to work.
You're exactly right. And that is the right question to be asking. Bitcoin's a great example of that. Like if Bitcoin, it is sound money. I wrote a book with 7 other Bitcoiners a year ago. It's called Thank God for Bitcoin. You can get it on Amazon, but it's a book about money from a Judeo-Christian perspective, and looking at, using the Bible essentially and looking at our existing money and is our money system that we have in the United States, is it moral? And that's a question that I bet you 85% of people have never asked.
Never.
But what I mean, but what I mean by that is, we are printing more and more dollars. We're inflating our currency, which devalues it over time, which is really a hidden tax, and it hits the poor much harder than it hits the rich.
Yeah.
And is that moral? Is that right? And so, Bitcoin and gold, too, that's a hard money, meaning that it's not getting devalued. It is, how many are going to be there.
Yeah.
And usually the hardest money wins over time. And so is that a good thing for Bitcoin to become harder money than the dollar? What effects does that create?
Wow.
I don't know.
Wow. So I'm getting a picture here of your real estate empire across the nation, these shopping centers. Are you putting up helium hotspots in each of these places saying, hey, as long as we own the property, we're going to set these things up?
We have done that on some. And what I'm excited about, what this allows for is you put a hotspot on here's an idea. You put a hotspot on your roof of your shopping center. And then maybe here's just one idea. You put door clickers or door counters on each of those doors. Okay. And so I own a shopping center, and let's just fast forward 5 years. I've had door counters on every one of my doors in these shopping centers. And so now I've built basically how many times these doors open over 5 years, and I can start building trends and say, okay, this tenant is going downhill quick because their numbers of the times their door is opening is going down. We need to get ahead of this. Or perhaps this tenant's doors open double what it did a year ago. When it's time to renew them, we can probably get more rent. So you could just get more data and it's more useful. So we're currently in the process right now figuring out which sensors we want to use for this very thing you raised.
We're coming to a close here, and I'm sick about it because there's a lot of content here. Quickly, how can people find you? And I have to admit that the part of your bio that piqued my interest the most is the chestnut tree farm, as well as pumpkins and truffle orchard. We didn't get into that, but let's tell them how they can find you.
Yes. We can talk about how I was a failed farmer later, but but you can find me. So my company, Shannon Waltchack, is shanwalt.com. I'd love for you to take a look. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty active there. It's at dwaltchack, WALTCHACK. And then I also have a podcast with real estate. It's called BrokerLord. And it's where I interview one person in each state. We've done 8 so far. 8 brokers who have gone from brokerage to ownership, and how, a real estate broker, commercial real estate broker, how they can get from there to owning a bunch of shopping centers or a bunch of buildings or whatever, and the different paths that people take to get there. And so I'm actually going out to the West Coast in a couple of weeks to interview my Washington State person. So we're going to have season 2 roll out probably this fall.
I have listened to it, folks. I listened to it in anticipation of this conversation with Derek. And as a non-commercial real estate guy, I must admit, I found it very compelling content. There are great stories being told on these things. And my hat's off to you, Derek, for doing that. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Cam. And you've been a great interviewer, and I love your podcast as well.
Thank you. Derek will be the keynote speaker at the Alabama Commercial Real Estate Conference on Friday, February 11th at The Club in Birmingham. To find out more about it, go to ACREcom.info. That's ACREcom.info. You're listening to What's Working, presented by the Alabama Center for Real Estate, housed at the University of Alabama. We'll be back after this with final comments.
I'm David Nelson, brewmaster and owner of Braided River Brewing. We want beer that goes along no matter where the adventure takes us, and that doesn't make us choose between great beer and drinkability. We're drawn to the Delta and united by beer, because to us, the best way to celebrate the Delta is to slow down and savor the moments and the beer together. Come visit our tap room in downtown Mobile and ask for us at your favorite bar or restaurant. Visit online at braidedriverbrewing.com.
Hi, I'm Chef Jewel at Fairhope Chocolate. When I'm not creating the best couverture chocolate creations south of the Mason-Dixon line, I'm listening to What's Working with Cam Marston. Now, back to the show.
Derek Waltchack's podcast, again, is called BrokerLord, BrokerLord. And I'm not lying when I say, though I'm not in the commercial real estate world, I found these stories on his podcast very compelling. These are people who took chances and have lived to tell the tale and have learned some great lessons for it. If you're interested at all in commercial real estate, it's well worth a listen to one of these things. You can find it on any of the big podcast distribution sites. That'll wrap us up this week. John Thompson is the show's producer. He's with Eyon Digital. Check him out, EYEON Digital. We'd love it if you'd follow us on all the social media things that you can find. If you look for Cam Marston on social media, if you've got feedback, email me directly, cam@cammarston.com, CAMMARSTON.com. Love to hear your ideas and your suggestions. You can find the podcast at what'sworkingcam.com. Have a good week, everybody.